Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for I Only Have Two Rules, Lead with Two Rules. And I want to take some time to thank Arlen for making this all happen today. So I know that he asked you to share in chat where you're from, who you are, and what role you have in education. And I wanted to just share real quick a little bit about me. I wanted to let you know that I am an overcomer, and that means that I have been through a lot in life that has made me realize that it takes a lot to be able to overcome things in life. And so, one of the things we'll talk about today is resilience. And I know that we're not going to be able to get through everything. And so, I'm going to focus on just a little bit today. And hopefully, we'll be able to come back in a part two, lead with two rules, so that we can share some more things. I think that building a trusted relationship with the students and families and staff and community is so important. But I really want you to take some time right now before we get started to reflect back and think about when you were a child. What do you remember that made you feel good and feel safe? And just think about that for just a moment as we get started. Now, you're thinking about what made you feel good and what made you feel safe. And I want you to think about what your family makeup was like in your neighborhood and your community. Do you think a family structure has an impact on a child? Are there things you remember that made you feel good and safe that are critical to helping you grow? What happens when these things are absent in our childhood or even in our adult life? One of the key components of leading with two rules is the ability to ask questions. And boy, did I ask you a whole bunch of questions just then. I love to ask questions. I like to wait for the responses because that seems a little uncomfortable. But if you wait and give people an opportunity to tell you what they're really thinking after you ask a question and you listen with intent, you'll find out some very incredible things. As we all know, one glove does not fit all, and we need to provide environments to support feeling good and feeling safe. So today, we're going to talk about goals and objectives. And like I said, we're not going to be able to get through everything about leading with two rules, but I'm hoping that today, leading with two rules will not only show you how important it is, but it'll help you with beginning to implement it as soon as you can. We'll take a deep dive into looking at, I told you, the resiliency and also the implementation, just the beginning of implementing two rules. You will see how using the two rules helps students understand themselves better and make plans for different choices and new behaviors. In addition, the importance of that resiliency building as students learn the five competencies of self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, making decisions, and it builds on a strong foundation for all of us and for them. We know that we want them to be the very best they can be, and we want all of our children to succeed. We'll also have a chance to do thinking out loud. I will have two slides that'll give us a chance to think out loud, and you'll share some things in chat. And Arlen, I'll need you to help me with that and telling me some things that are in the chat.
Yes,
So
can do. Brenda, just a real quick question. Are you hearing that dinging on your side?
I'm not hearing dinging. Is there dinging?
Yeah,
I,
I
I,
can't quite make it. Sounds like some kind of notification. I don't know if it was my computer or does anyone else hear the dinging in the audience? Okay, Bridget says yes.
okay. It could be on mine.
Yep, Sarah hears it. I don't know if you're getting texts or emails or something like that on the iPad.
Do you still hear it?
No, it has stopped.
Okay. I think it was a cord.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. Yeah, you're back. Everything sounds
Okay.
good.
All right. Thanks for letting me know that. So, in thinking out loud, this gives everybody an opportunity to feel good and to feel safe. And when I say feel good, I'm talking about feeling valued and feeling like they belong. And so, this is in creating an environment where everybody feels trust and the ability to be able to share. So, we'll talk about that in a couple of our slides and have the opportunity to experience that. Why only two rules? I'll talk about how I came out with two rules. Why did I pick only two rules? And I'll tell you a little story about the history of that and the theory that I follow that led me to realize that we really only need two rules of feeling good and feeling safe. We'll talk about choice, which is so important for everybody to realize, especially our kids, that this is a superpower we all have. We all have the power of choice. They can always make a choice. But with choice comes responsibility, accountability, and consequences. We all have to realize that choice provides us with the opportunity to make our own choices, but also to live with those three things. Resiliency, we're going to talk about, and it's emerged as a key factor in a child's ability to cope with adverse experiences. And we're going to look at a study that has been done with resilience and the 12 factors that we need to look at. And I'm going to give you two handouts. I think Arlen is going to help me get that out to you, that you'll be able to use within your school system to be able to identify those areas and what you're doing currently to see what you're doing to support resilience building, and then also what you can do to improve it. And then my favorite is problem solution. And we'll talk a little bit about problem solving and finding solutions. But my favorite phrase for decades has been, you can choose to be part of the problem or part of the solution. The choice is always yours to make. That is a statement that I have said to kids for over 2 decades now. So grown men with beards will stop me in the grocery store and repeat that phrase to me. So that always makes me smile and giggle just a little bit that they can still remember that phrase. At the end, we'll have some questions and a closing. So with that, we'll get started. So why two rules? Well, it started back when I was a third grade student. And I know I've talked about building those relationships with students, with your coworkers, and the importance of relationships. As a third grade student, my mother received a phone call from her family in Kentucky saying that she needed to come home immediately because her mom was dying. When I heard that we were going to Kentucky, I thought, fun. I was going to get to go see my family, play with my cousins until we got there. And we arrived at a big parking lot at a hospital with two doors that opened wide into a very cold, long hallway to a room where I saw my grandmother, which didn't look like my grandmother, all shriveled up in a bed with a big tent over her. It was cold and I was scared. And I went into the room. She reached her hand underneath the tent to grab mine, and it was cold and bony, and I pulled it back very quickly. It wasn't long that I was escorted out of the room and then later told my grandmother had passed away. The days followed, and they were, as you all know, filled with people crying and lots of things with visitation, a funeral, and just a lot of chaos. And then I ended up going back to school, and I had missed probably over a week of school. And I went back to school and I took a math test. And of course, I failed it. because we know that if you miss some concepts in math, that sometimes you can make lots of mistakes. So the teacher says, take it home and have a parent sign it and bring it back. I'm a rule follower, so that's exactly what I did. So I took it home and my mom signed it. She didn't like how it looked, so she erased her name and signed it again. She didn't like how it looked, so she erased it. She signed it, and I said, Mom, please don't erase anymore. I've got to walk to school. It looks great. See, my mom wanted to look the best because it was going to the teacher. The secret was my mom and dad didn't know how to read or write, and no one knew that. But my mom had practiced her name, and she was very proud of it, and I was too. It looked beautiful. I took the paper to school. There was lots of kids around the desk. I laid it on the teacher's desk and was walking back to mine when I heard my name, Brenda. I turned around and I saw her angry looking face as she said, Brenda, this looks like you signed this test and not your mom in front of everyone. And I was shaking my head no. Out to the hallway. So I went out to the hallway with her. As we reached the hallway, she said, I'm going to call home and talk to your mom. I said, oh, please don't call my mom. She thought instantly I was guilty because I was begging not to call home. She got the teacher next door. Now everybody's looking at me. The teacher next door is shaking her head in disgust. As she goes downstairs, she calls home. Lucky for me, my older sister was at home. She's 17 years older than me. As you can tell, I was a gift from God. She comes to school and they talk, they whisper, and then my sister takes me home, and the teacher never says anything else to me. She never apologized. She didn't say anything. I didn't feel good or safe about being at school any longer because now everybody was bullying me and picking on me. And that lasted until I got to high school. So that's where Lead with Two Rules really begins, is because bullying kind of started for me in third grade because the teacher didn't take the time to really get to know who I was, but she really didn't respond the way I thought that she should in front of all the kids because I was really shy at that time. And some other things happened throughout my school years in regards to bullying. I had a classmate when I was in high school as a freshman. He was an upper student and a junior in a journalism class. The teacher was teaching. He lived next door to the teacher. The teacher comes in one day. He's angry and he says, we have an empty desk in this room this morning. You know why? Because this morning I went out and I found him hanging in the tree next door. He had killed himself because of bullying. That stayed with me for many, many years. Because as he was talking, which I'm not going to say that that was the best way to tell any of us, but I was looking at all of the kids who I knew had been doing what he was saying, and I couldn't believe what had just happened. And so then I thought to myself, I guess I wasn't the only one who wasn't feeling good and feeling safe. So became very important to me as an educator to make sure that everyone felt good and felt safe at school. And October happens to be Bullying Awareness Month. So thank you, Arlen, for making sure that I got in time for this because it's important for us to talk about. And I want you to know that with implementation of this in your school, lots of things will happen. And it won't happen immediately. It'll be progression over time. But you will find that when your school has two rules, culture, a foundation will be laid to support students and faculty through crisis and trauma. That is, the two rules does more than help students learn empathy and how to ask questions when they make it part of their thought process. And I'm going to show you how it becomes part of their thought process. Your climate will improve, your culture will improve, attendance improves, behavior, academics, relationships, student regulation becomes better. Student responsibility becomes better. Student problem solving comes better. Listening skills. There's so much more that happens with two rules, with just a simple implementation that I will share with you on how to do if you just begin with just having them ask themselves some simple questions. I introduced two rules in my classroom as a teacher and then as a principal. And I will tell you, I've done it in a rural school district and I've done it in a very large unit district. In fact, I did it with a school, a middle school of 602 students. And this school had fights every day, 3 different gangs. It was a very low economic school, low achieving school, and we turned it around. We were improving everything. In fact, our academics was better than the other middle school who had the gifted program. So I know it works. So I will help you with learning how to implement this. And that's what we will do in the next few slides. So right now, I want you to think out loud. So as you go through your day, what do you see? What are the things that you see in your community where you live, in your schools, in your workplace? If you want to be a place where people are feeling good and feeling safe, I'd like for you to think about what you're seeing. And if you want to share some of those points in the chat, please share them and Arlen will help me so we can have a discussion. As you're typing those things, I will say, I have made this statement before and I stand by it and I'll always stand by it. Society is a reflection of what we have allowed to happen together. In order to change what we see, we together, home, school, community, will need to work together in order to find the solutions. Do we have something in chat, Arlen?
Looking in chat right now, no, I don't see any new posts since you've asked. So participants out there, please type into chat, what do you see in your
Yeah.
communities?
In your schools, in your workplace? What are some of the things that you see that you want to share? They can be good, they can be, negative. I don't care what they are. Just what do you see?
Bridget Belcastro says, people working together in my school.
That is awesome. That's great. If they're working together, Bridget, you're doing something really great. If they're working together, What about your students? Are your students working together as well, Bridget? Are you talking students and staff and community?
Sarah says, I see students laughing and having a good time. I see staff laughing and greeting students. I see students dysregulated and staff trying to collaborate to appropriate interventions.
Great. I'm feeling hope.
Darren says, staff trying to overcome challenges of the students.
Okay.
Back to
Okay.
Bridget. She says, mostly our students are grades 3-5, so we are working with them. Our families are half and half, and most want to help.
Okay.
And
All right.
from Jenna, one last one from Jennifer, staff understanding the whole child and trying to support their SEL. I see our students struggling to relate to one another.
Okay. Let's go here then. So let's go to this next slide. And so one of the things that I want us to think about now is, what do we want to see? Now, I want to clarify with this, do we want to see? Now, what do we want to see in our schools, in our community, our workplace, in the homes, in our area, in our own homes? If you want to put things in the chat, we can talk about that, because we heard some really positive things. I heard some things that we want to work on. The main difference between needs and wants is what I want to talk about, because needs are things that are necessary for survival, while wants are things that you would like to have but aren't required to live. So here's what I mean. Needs are things like essential foods, like for human survival, water, shelter, healthcare, transportation. A deficiency in those kinds of needs will cause issues and adverse outcomes such as dysfunction or death. So, wants are like, entertainment and things like that. So I'm going to go back to, what do you want to see? I don't want to think about the needs of like health, food, water, shelter, all those things, because we're going to make an assumption that we're going to be able to provide those things, that those things are being provided. They may not be, but there are services that are there that we know that will help people to get those things. So we don't have anybody who is going to fall ill because they don't have some of those things, because we're going to make sure that those services are being taken care of. But what do we want our kids that we're serving to have, our families to have, our community to have? What are those wants that we want to see in those areas?
Jennifer got us started off. Oh, am I muted? No, okay. Jennifer got us started off by saying, I want to see kindness and understanding of others so that people feel safe.
That's great, Jennifer. That's a good answer. I'll join you with kindness and empathy, understanding. Those are some things.
Sarah says, I want to see all students fit into this school community. I want to see parents communicate with the school and not communicate on social media. I want to see celebrations, both big and small. And overall, I work in a good building.
I love that. I want to see celebrations big and small. I love that. And the communication with individuals, not at them, through social media and through other avenues. We are doing so much of that, talking at people instead of talking with people. So I totally agree with that. It's hard for me because I can't see you guys, because all I'm doing is I'm staring at these what do I want eyes. But you're spot on. That's exactly what I want to talk about. So when we're looking at the rules, I shared with you about my third grade experience and how I felt in third grade. Obviously, I carried that with me, that experience, for a very long time. Okay. I grew up during the 70s, so you know I'm old. Um, so I had guidelines just like all the other kids. I mean, we all had the same kinds of rules. Like, this is gonna, for some of the young people in the group, you know, when the neighborhood street lights turned on, we knew that that was time for us to go home. We knew that nobody had to yell for us. The street lights came on, we went home, and everybody in the neighborhood knew everybody. And so if we did something, we knew we were going to be in trouble because the Johnny's mom down the street was going to tell my mom, and I was going to be in big trouble. When you were a kid, what rules did you have as a child? What is the first rule that you taught your children, if you have children, or what's the first rule that you teach? Share that in the chat. Just tell me a rule that you had as a child.
Sarah says, my rule is be nice and stand up for others.
Okay, that's feel good.
Darren says, be respectful. Jennifer says, be kind.
Okay.
And Bridget says, I'm not sure I can remember that. We had to keep our house clean.
Okay.
Sasha says, clear is kind. And Sarah says, my kids' rules are use your manners and stand up for yourself and others.
Okay. All right. I'm going to add a couple of rules. One of my rules that my mom taught me was look both ways before you cross the street. Don't go with strangers or talk to them. Those were two of my rules I can remember. So all of these rules that we are sharing, do they have something to do in common with, do they all have something to do with feeling safe? Do they have something with feeling good or feeling valued? And the answer is yes, they do. My next question is, how do you establish rules as a leader? Are they rules or expectations? I want you to think about that. Like, if you're a leader with your group and you're talking about, are you talking about rules for people to follow that you're leading, or are you talking about expectations? And let me just tell you, expectations are general characteristics or ways you would like children and adults to behave. Rules help define exactly what expectations mean. Now, I've listened to you guys with talking about your buildings, and you're telling me some of the great things that are happening. I heard them. I heard some things you like to work on. So I'm going to assume by all that chatter that your expectation already is that you want everybody, staff, students, families, to feel good and to feel safe. And I think if you think about the expectations that you have, they probably come back to feeling good and feeling safe. We're going to talk about how do you apply and teach this model and enforce these rules, and how this gets started. But I want to talk to you about this. Now, we all have seen this probably in our studies, but if you think about any of the rules we've talked about, any of the rules you have in your student handbook, any of the rules you have in your classroom, you have at home, all of them will match up with this theory, which I have applied lead with two rules with. The bottom, we talked about the air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing. A lot of our families that are low economic, we have places that we can ensure that those things are going to be met. We really work hard at making sure those things happen for them so that those needs are met. We work really hard as schools, as humans, to make sure that nobody is going without that. We do have a rise in the needs right now. We have a lot of homeless people. We have a lot of people who need so much. So the need is rising. So I don't know how much longer I would be able to say that we have a lot of people that and agencies that are helping to make this happen for people. We do still have a lot of people who need this need to be met. But safety is there in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And we all need to feel that safety. All of us. We all need to feel like we belong and we have a sense of friendship. And I heard many of you talking about that you had people working together. And if you have that and people are doing that, you've got to continue to build on that and expand on that and make sure that that's happening and that it's happening with everyone that's working with coworkers and with students and with families, because it takes homeschool and community working together to make this really work, to see the changes that we want to see. The esteem two rules will help kids to strengthen this, will help them to see the respect that they need to have for themselves and others when they simply start to ask the questions I'm going to share with you. When they start doing that, they'll be able to get to these next two levels. And that's what we want for our kids to have at a young age so they can continue to build on that as adults, because we all need this. The levels of esteem and self-actualization come when we have work to make sure feeling good and feeling safe is in place at each level consistently. We have to understand that all of the rules we have in place are not always followed. This is why I believe it is so important to begin to teach the process of two rules in school as soon as we can and continue to provide it on the learning journey. It's so important. So, with that being said, this is how I introduce lead with two rules. One of the things I state all the time, this is not one more thing for teachers to do. This is not something you have to plan. This isn't something that you have to do. I introduced this on day one of the school year when I became a principal at a middle school that was very tough. I asked all of the teachers to leave. Yeah, they thought I was crazy and they hesitated. They didn't want to leave me with 602 kids. But I felt it was important because we had to establish trust. I needed them to see that I trusted them, and I had to teach them and ask them that they had to learn to trust me. This is what I asked them to do. Everyone who walks through the doors of our school is going to feel good about being here, and they're going to feel safe. And this is how you can help us make that happen. Before you say anything, ask yourself, is this going to make me feel good? Is this going to make others feel good? Is this going to make me feel safe? Is this going to make others feel safe? Before you do anything, ask yourself, is this going to make me feel good? Is this going to make others feel good? Is this going to make me feel safe? Is this going to make others feel safe? If the answer is no to any of those questions, you've identified a problem in need of a solution. You need to talk it over with a trusted adult. Now, I am going to work to be a trusted adult for you. Every teacher, every staff member in this building is going to work to be a trusted adult for you. We are here to help you problem solve and to be safe and to feel good and to help everyone else do the same. That is how we introduced Lead with Two Rules. Didn't ask the teachers to do an extra thing. I didn't ask anybody to, but I asked the students to ask themselves the questions. Now, I repeat it every day in the hallways. Are you being part of the problem or part of the solution? Make it a great day or not. The choice is yours. We repeated phrases. I modeled it. Teachers started modeling it. Kids were modeling it. When someone was sent to my office, were you part of the problem or part of the solution? And I'd wait until they answered. Then they would finally say, I was part of the problem. How were you part of the problem? And then we would go from there. And then they would say, I said, so now what's the solution? What's the consequence? What's your responsibility? What's your accountability? That's how it works. It becomes part of who they are. That is as easy as it can be to begin to implement Lead with Two Rules. It's simple and it works. And it changes things immediately. That's how you begin to implement. Now, let's talk about choice. This is when I talk to them about the superpower of having choice. It's so important to help the children understand the power of choice because, they have so many choices that they make every day. And we have to figure out how to help them see those things. And when we teach the Lead by Two Rules consistently daily, always talking about we only have two rules, ask yourself the questions. Can we problem solve? The best phrase that you can do every single day is to ask them, do you want to be part of the problem or part of the solution? The choice is always yours to make. It's so important to help them to understand that choices that they make, not that you make, not that their friend makes, not that somebody else does, it's the choice they make because they're not puppets on a string. And that's what I often tell them. You're not a puppet on a string. What was the choice that you made? Were you part of the problem or part of the solution? And you can't tell me that Johnny did that, or you can't tell me that Susie did that. Lakeisha didn't do that. You have to tell me what your choice was. And that's how we get kids to understand that when they make the choice, that they have the consequence, they have the responsibility and the accountability. So your job is no longer about passing out. You come in and I'll give you a suspension. I do this, I do that. Nope, we're not doing that. We want to get to the root of the problem. And the problem is, how do we get to this choice? And how can we choose better? What do we need to do to repair? What do we need to do to correct? That's what this whole thing is about, choice. And once it becomes part of who they are, their choices become better because they're learning how the choice system works and how to problem solve. I gotta watch my time. Resilience. I promised I was going to talk about this. And I want you to look at this list because this is so important. These are the 12 factors in a child's ability to cope with adverse experiences. And this comes from the Welsh National Health Service study of 2017. They used face-to-face interviews with 2,497 adults and found that half of the adults in the Wales had had 4 or more adverse experiences during childhood. However, adults who had the kind of support that builds resilience in childhood had a decreased risk of mental illness in adulthood. There are 12 of these, and you can read through them. And what I want to share with you is that after looking at the study, I found that Lead with Two Rules helps with building this resilience. So let me just read from my book a little bit. As I looked at the list, what jumped out at me was that Two Rules School can be a place where students have access to many of these resources. Teaching students to ask, will this make them feel safe? And will this help them feel good? Prepares them to be the kind of friend who will stand by a student undergoing difficulties like bullying or other things. That's like the bullet point number 8. It creates an environment where students feel they belong at school, which is your bullet point number 7. When a school principal and teachers in the school model the two rules consistently, when they interact with students, the school has a culture where students are treated fairly. That's bullet point number 10. And where adults know their students because they have developed relationships with them. I'm going back to that trusted relationship, that trusted adult, building those support systems. In part 2 of this, I will share with you on how to build teams and how to make sure that every child in your building has a support system that we develop, and how we can tell right away if there's a change in behavior. Students know that there are people in the school they can turn to for help when they need it, and they're not afraid to ask for it. When they struggle to complete a task, there will be an adult who can encourage them and support them. I have addressed number 6 and number 4. There are people in the school building that students look up to. That's number 1. All of the resources put together provide a setting for a student to feel that their education is important for their future, which is number 2. And then learning how to problem solve, finding a trusted adult and establishing a support system prevents me from seeking other ways to self-medicate. That is a very important bullet point. And I was able to solve problems without harming myself or others, without using drugs or being violent. One of the big components of my phrase is saying homeschool and community must work together to be the solution for what all these kids really need. One of the things to do is to bring in outside agencies into your building so that kids know things that can help them, and get those counselors in there. That goes with the next one too. I know in my community where to get help. That helps them to see where to get help in the community when they already build a relationship with them within your school. Building community projects, doing partnerships, connected in the school helps to support your community, and having things that the community feels that they feel like they're connected to the community. I can tell you from having the 3 different gangs within my building, talking to my kids, they told me that they had to belong to a gang, because if they didn't, when they stepped out of their homes, that everybody would be against them instead of just half the people. And then they told me that they had to walk in groups in order to be safe. But when they did that, people in the community looked at them as if they were going to be causing some kind of trouble when really they weren't. So there's a lot of things that when you really talk to kids and have some difficult conversations, they'll tell you lots of things that you need to know that will help you with learning what you need to do to help them to build this resiliency, because anybody who has been alive during the global pandemic has went through a traumatic event, and they know that they've had some troubles and difficulties. So this building this resiliency is important to all of them. You'll get a handout that we'll give to you, but I wanted to go over real quick that, these are the problems that I feel like we faced. And I wanted you to share if you have some other ones that you feel like that you face. We had a lack of positive role models and environmental influences, mental health, substance abuse that we were dealing with. So I brought in some outside agencies to help us with dealing with those things. And the positive role models, when I talk about trust, that's huge. It's hard to build trust when trust has been broken with someone. So working on that trusting relationship is a hard thing, but a very important thing to do. And so share if you have any other thoughts. And one of the things that I wanted to say is that a call to action is what we need in order to begin to turn around what we need in order to build a world in which we have respect for self, others, and the world we live in. It must begin with solutions. And if we always focus on the problems and never on the solutions, actions are never completed to remove the problems. You can reach out to me anytime, and I'm happy to help you. And this truly is a simplistic approach, which builds additional supports. It's truly not one more thing to do, just one thing to do to eliminate problems consistently every day. So I hope that it's helped, and we'll take some questions.
All right, wonderful. Brenda, thank you so much for your time this afternoon and sharing with us how to lead with just those 2 rules. Anybody have any questions in the audience, feel free to type it into the chat. We've got plenty of time to address any questions that might have come up, or comments or feedback for us both. Brenda, I love the idea of doing a part 2, that you've got so much great information to share.
Thanks, Arlen. I'm gonna close this out so then I can see all of you. See you.
Yeah, if you come back to Zoom, you should be able. There you are. Perfect.
Yeah. There you go.
And you can see some of the comments that were put in there, Brenda. Actually, I think your webcam turns off whenever you open comments. That's so strange.
I know. It's okay.
We'll work with it, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna work with it.
We'll roll with it.
We're gonna roll with it. Now I can see some of the comments.
Okay, good.
So I'll share in the comments in the chat. This is my website. And this is my email address. I am happy to help with anything that you have questions about, and anything. I post every week on my website, so there's lots of information about 2 rules. So if I didn't say it today and you want to know more, you can find out more at the website.
Brenda, you said there's a handout or something you can share with me when I send the recording link?
Yes, there's 2. There's a paper, a list of the resilient factors, and then there's a worksheet that they can use in their school that will show what you are currently doing to build resilient students, and then what more you can do.
Perfect. So I'll be sending an email tomorrow to all of our registrants with a link to the recording and a link to the 2 handouts, as well as the course evaluation or the webinar evaluation. It's the ISB form. You'll do it online, and if you complete that, You will receive 1 PD clock hour for your attendance this afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you, Brenda. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.